No. Our body going to be controlled by two systems, the nervous system and endocrine system. These two systems going to control all of the systems, all of the organs, all tissues, and all cells in our body, but in two different ways. The nervous system is a fast controlling system. The endocrine system is slow controlling system. The nervous system, through releasing the neurotransmitter, is going to control all functions of our body. The endocrine system, through releasing the hormones, is going to control all functions of our body. We're going to talk about the endocrine system. Before that, you should know the organs of endocrine system. The organs of endocrine system, they're going to be scattered through our body. They are not going to be located only in the head and neck part, only in the thoracic region, or only in the abdominal pelvic region. They're going to be found everywhere, like in our neck and head, in our thoracic cavity, in our abdominal pelvic cavity. The organs of endocrine system, we call them as glands. Endocrine glands. If you remember, we have two types of glands, exocrine glands and endocrine glands. The term crine means secrete, endo means inside. So the endocrine glands gonna secrete their products directly into the blood. So they don't need to have a duct. So that's the reason we call them as ductless glands. But the exocrine glands, like the sweat glands, the salivary glands, the mammillary glands, they are exocrine glands. They have to release their products into a duct. So they do have a duct. So they have the secretory unit and a duct. But for the endocrine glands, there is no duct. That's the reason our endocrine glands are highly vascularized. There are too many blood capillaries around them. There is a close relation between these glands and blood vessels because they're gonna release their products into the blood. What are their products? We call their products as hormones. So they are not going to be called as neurotransmitters. Their products not going to be called as enzymes or saliva or, I don't know, sebum. Their products are called hormones. We have different hormones in our body. Their structure can be different. Some hormones can be like amino acid based hormones. Some hormones can be protein based hormones. Some hormones can be steroid based hormones. So we have different structure of the hormones, which they have different functions, and they're going to be produced and released by different organs, endocrine organs. Okay, so imagine we have an endocrine gland. It's going to produce hormone and release it directly into the blood. Through the blood, they're going to go to their target organ or target cells. What does it mean, target cells? The cells, they have receptors for that specific hormone. We call them as target gland or target cells or target organs. For example, the insulin hormone, its target going to be like the cells, the most cells in our body, which they're going to uptake the glucose from our blood. Or the parathyroid hormone target organ would be the bone cells, because bone cells have receptor for the parathyroid hormone. So you should know the general function of endocrine system. They're going to maintain homeostasis. They're going to make balance in our body. They're going to control the growth. They're going to control the metabolism. And also they're gonna like control the function of all cells and all organs, tissues in our body. They're gonna be called as ductless gland because they don't have any duct. They do not need any ducts because they're gonna release their product hormones into the blood. We have to define target cells or target organs. Target cells or target organs are the cells or organs they have receptor for that specific hormones. And as I mentioned, the endocrine system is a slow controlling system which can work with the nervous system, but in different way to control our body. They are scattered throughout the body. We have some organs which they belong to the endocrine system. They only gonna do the endocrine job, like pituitary gland or hypophysis gland. It only knows to secrete some hormones and control our body. The pineal gland. Yes, we do have these two organs, pituitary gland, pineal gland in our like brain or in our like head, but they are actually gonna do for endocrine system. Thyroid gland, only it knows to produce the hormones, the parathyroid hormone as well, and the parathyroid gland and adrenal gland, which they are the suprarenal gland. They are the glands on top of the kidneys. These are the pure endocrine organs. But there are some endocrine organs which they belong to other systems as well. Like pancreas. Pancreas is a very, very important gland in our digestive system. In our digestive system, again, we're going to study the pancreas because it's very important for our digestive system. It's going to produce and release very important digestive enzymes. But it also contains some endocrine cells, which those endocrine cells are going to produce and release hormones. So our pancreas is both endocrine and exocrine gland. Thymus. We did study the lymphatic system, right? You know, thymus is a very important organ of our lymphatic system, our immune system, because our T cells, the lymphocyte T, they originate from the bone marrow, but they're gonna travel to the thymus because thymus is a school for the T cells to be matured, to be trained, to be graduated at thymus, and then they're gonna be able to like defend our body against microorganisms. So thymus is an organ of lymphatic system, but also it has some endocrine cells which they are able to produce hormone. Gonads in male testes and for female ovaries. Of course, they are the primary sex organs of reproductive system because their job is to produce sperm and oocytes, and also they are able to produce a hormone. So they have the endocrine job as well. Hypothalamus. We did study hypothalamus in our nervous system. It's part of the nervous system, but also it can produce some hormones. So you can see that we have some pure endocrine organs and some endocrine organs which they can work with some other system as well. They can be actually part of the other system, but they have the endocrine cells which they are able to produce the hormones. The endocrine glands or organs are highly vascularized because they need the blood vessel. They need to have a very close relation with blood because they're going to release their products, their hormones to the blood. So here in this image, you can see the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, and pituitary gland going to be found in our head region. In the neck region, we can find the thyroid gland. In the mediastinum, we have the thymus. In the abdominal pelvic cavity, we can find the adrenal gland, pancreas, and also the ovary and testes. So you can see that our endocrine organs are scattered throughout our body. So as I mentioned, the hormone can have different structures. They can be very, very small, like, and they can be amino acid, or they can be proteins, or some of the hormones they have, like they are lipid based, derived from cholesterol. They are steroids like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. What is their basic action? They circulate throughout the body in blood vessels. And the target cells, they have the receptor for that specific hormone, so they only can influence those cells or those tissues. And a hormone can have different effects on different target cells. But how are like endocrine organs or endocrine glands know to produce and release the hormone? How they gonna be stimulated? So the secretion triggered by 3 major types of stimuli. The stimulus gonna be humoral, the changing or like increasing or decreasing of the iron level or nutrients level in the blood can trigger some endocrine glands to produce hormones. For example, if there is increasing at the level of the calcium in our blood or decreasing at the level of calcium in our blood, the parathyroid gland and thyroid gland can be triggered to produce their hormones. Or if there is like increasing or decreasing at the sugar level in our blood, the pancreas would be stimulated to produce the insulin hormone or glucagon hormone. So that is the definition of the humoral stimuli. And also, we have the neural stimuli. For example, our sympathetic nervous system can stimulate the adrenal medulla to produce some hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine. And also we have the hormonal stimulus. It means that some hormones can stimulate the other glands to produce their specific hormones. So then we can divide the stimulus which we need to what is the word that I'm looking for? Some kind of how our endocrine gland or endocrine organs be stimulated through these 3 ways: humoral, neural, and hormonal, based on the changing iron or nutrient level, based on the presence of some neural stimulus, like through the sympathetic nervous system, or through presence of some other hormones. Okay, here we go. That's a very good image that it can help us to understand this topic, the humoral stimulus. Just imagine there is a low level of calcium in our blood. What's going to happen when there is a low level of calcium? Our parathyroid gland would be stimulated to produce the parathyroid hormone, because the parathyroid hormone is going to increase the blood calcium level. So that is the humoral stimulus. With the changing of the iron, we can stimulate the organ, the gland, to produce its hormone. or through the neural stimulus, the sympathetic fibers, which they comes from our central nervous system, they can stimulate our adrenal medulla cells to produce their hormone, like epinephrine and norepinephrine. Or you can see that our hypothalamus, it can produce some hormones, and those hormones can stimulate our anterior pituitary gland to produce the other hormones. So you can see the hormone can stimulate the other gland to produce other hormone. That is the definition of the hormonal stimulus. And also the way that our endocrine organs can be controlled, they're going to be controlled by feedback loops. We have the positive feedback and then negative feedback, which mostly they're going to be controlled by negative feedback. It means that if there is high level of like that hormone in our blood, so then the organ would be inhibited to produce that hormone. If there is low level of that hormone in our blood, so that organ would be stimulated to produce more hormone. So in this way, we can see that they can control itself through the negative feedback. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of these organs. Pituitary gland is very important gland. It's actually going to be the master gland, because pituitary gland is going to produce some hormones, which those hormones can regulate the other endocrine glands. The thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, and the pineal gland not going to be discussed here. The pancreas and thymus. Thymus is also not going to be discussed because we talked about the thymus before, and also we're going to talk about the gonads. Let's look at the first endocrine gland, pituitary gland or hypophysis gland. The pituitary gland is a very important gland. We can call this as a master gland. Why it's a master gland? Because pituitary gland can produce some hormones, which those hormones can control and regulate the other endocrine glands. This is a master gland, master endocrine gland. But our master gland has its own boss. The pituitary gland is a boss, but it has its own boss as well. What is the boss for pituitary gland? Is hypothalamus, which we're going to discuss about it. There is a physical connection between the pituitary gland and hypothalamus. This physical connection is called infundibulum. So through the infundibulum, our pituitary gland going to be connected to the hypothalamus. Look at this picture. Do you remember? This is a sagittal section of the head, brain. So you can see the thalamus here, and then here you can find the hypothalamus just below the thalamus. Let's look at this one. That is our thalamus, the hypothalamus, and this is our pituitary gland or hypophysis. Look here, there is a structure which gonna connect our pituitary gland to the hypothalamus. This one, which we call this as infundibulum. Okay, so there is a physical connection between these two organs. As I mentioned, the pituitary gland is very important, is our master gland, and it's a very, very tiny gland. And we should protect the pituitary gland. That's the reason in our sphenoid bone, if you remember, there is a house for pituitary gland. In the sella torsica of a sphenoid bone, there is a little depression, which we call that hypophyseal fossa. So the hypophyseal fossa A depression in cellular thoracic of sphenoid bone is a house for the pituitary gland. Okay, so we are talking about the endocrine system. In endocrine system, we have some endocrine glands, which they are scattered throughout our body. Their job is to produce and release hormones directly into the blood. Those hormones, they're going to be carried in our blood and they're going to reach to the all cells. But just those cells, they have receptors for that specific hormones. They can be impacted by those hormones. We call those cells as target cells. Okay, and now we're going to talk about each of those endocrine glands. We started from the hypophysis or pituitary gland, which is a master gland. It's going to produce 9 major hormones. And there is a physical connection between the hypophysis and hypothalamus through infundibulum. And also, it has a house in our sphenoid bone in the cellular thoracea, which we call this as hypophyseal fossa. We can divide our pituitary gland to 2 parts, the anterior part and posterior part. These 2 parts are completely different. If you look at them under a microscope, their structures are different. The hormones they're going to produce are completely different. Their embryological origin are completely different. The adrenal hypophysis is much like gland, so you can find the gland cells or the secretory cells. So it's a glandular portion of the hypophysis, but the neurohypophysis is much more like the nervous tissue. So it's the neural portion. It means if you look at the adrenal hypophysis under microscope, you mostly can find the secretory cells. If you look at the neurohypophysis under microscope, you can find the neuron, axon, dendrite. So it looks like the neural or nervous tissue. Okay, so here in this picture, you can see part of this sphenoid bone, which this is our hypophyseal fossa, a depression in our cellular thoracica, which is going to make a house for our very important gland, the hypophysis gland or pituitary gland. And then you can see the hypophysis gland, it has 2 portions, 2 different portions. The anterior lobe or anterior part of the pituitary gland is called adenohypophysis, which is glandular. And then the posterior lobe is called the neurohypophysis, which is neural. Oops. Oh. Okay. The anterior lobe or adenohypophysis, it has different type of endocrine cells. So it means that it can produce different type of hormones. We have growth hormone or GH, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, adrenal corticotropin hormone, ACTH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, MSH, follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone or LH. We can call these 2 as gonadotropin hormone. Gonad, it means testes and ovary. Tropin, it means the hormones which they're gonna control and regulate other endocrine glands. So gonadotropin hormones can be FSH and LH. Let me see. Okay. These are the hormones going to be produced and released by the adrenal hypophysis, which you should know these all hormones. Do you remember I told you that there is a physical connection between the hypothalamus and hypophysis? There is actually more than a physical connection. There is a vascular connection between the hypothalamus and hypophysis as well. But this time, this vascular connection is going to be between the hypothalamus and the adenohypophysis. Please make sure you understand this. This is a relationship between the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus, which is a vascular connection. I'm going to talk about this vascular connection. So if I ask you that, this vascular connection is going to be between the hypothalamus and which parts, or between which organs? It is between the hypothalamus and adenohypophysis, or anterior lobe of pituitary gland. But what does it mean, this vascular connection, and what is the role of this vascular connection? I told you that the pituitary gland, it has a boss. But the way that the boss, the hypothalamus, gonna control the hypophysis gonna be through the vascular connection and neural connection. Through the vascular connection, the hypothalamus gonna control the adenohypophysis. Look here. The hypothalamus is part of our nervous system, right? But it also is able to produce some different hormones. The hormones that hypothalamus can produce it, those hormones can control the anterior pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus gonna produce those hormones and release them into the blood capillary, which we have here. Okay, because we know at the blood capillary level, the exchange is going to happen. The hormone can enter and exit the blood capillary. So here we have a blood capillary. So do you remember? We had the artery, arterial, capillary, venal, and vein, right? But let's see what do we have here. We have capillary, which the capillary join together and make the venal, and venal join together and make a vein. We call this as a hypophyseal portal vein. Do you remember? We talked about the hepatic portal vein. Whenever you hear the portal, it means we have to have capillary network. Two capillary network. So the first capillary network is here in hypothalamus, which we call this as primary capillary plexus or network. And here the hormones of hypothalamus going to be released into the primary capillary plexus, and those short hypophyseal portal veins going to reach to the anterior lobe of pituitary gland and make another capillary network here. So we have the secondary capillary plexus here. Why do we have this secondary capillary plexus? Again, we have the exchanges of the hormones. So through these capillary networks, the hormones, the hypothalamic hormones, gonna exit. Now we have those hormones here in our adenohypophysis, which they're gonna control the adenohypophysis. Those hormones, some are stimulating hormone, some are inhibiting hormones. The stimulating hormones and inhibiting hormones going to be produced by hypothalamus and released into the primary capillary plexus and then travel through the hypophyseal portal veins and reach to the adenohypophysis and then exit through the secondary capillary plexus, and they can stimulate or inhibit the cells which we have in the adenohypophysis. If they're a stimulating hormone, they can stimulate those cells to produce produce more hormone. If there are inhibiting hormones, they're going to stop those cells to produce and release hormones. So in this way, our hypothalamus, through the vascular connection, can control our adenohypophysis. Okay. So you can see the hypothalamus. It's going to control the secretion of anterior lobe hormones by secreting the releasing hormone or stimulating hormone and inhibiting hormones. So the releasing hormones prompt anterior lobe to release hormones. For example, we have growth hormone releasing hormone. Growth hormone releasing hormone is a product of hypothalamus. Through the hypothalamic portal vein, it goes to the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. It's going to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to produce more growth hormone. We have growth hormone inhibiting hormone is a product of hypothalamus. If it goes to the anterior pituitary gland, it's gonna decrease the secretion of growth hormone. So in this way, the hypothalamus can control the pituitary gland, the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. And it's very interesting because the anterior pituitary gland also is going to control the other endocrine glands in our body. Do you have any questions so far? Okay. Then let's look at these hormones and know what are the target glands for those hormones and what's going to be the action for those hormones. Let's start with the growth hormone, the GH or somatotroph. The target organ, so we know the GH or growth hormone going to be released into the blood and it's going to go everywhere in our body, but their target organ or target cell is going to be found in our bone, muscle, liver, cartilage, and also we can say that most of the cells in our body, they have receptor for growth hormone. What is the action of the growth hormone? It can stimulate the protein synthesis. It also can stimulate the somatic growth, the bone growth, and also it can be involved in metabolizing the fat and increasing the blood sugar. It has an anti-insulin effect. It can increase the blood sugar. If there is low level of growth hormone before our, like in children, we can get the pituitary dwarfism. That's because of the lack of the GH or insufficient amount of the GH hormone. If there is high level of GH more than normal in children, they can get very, very long. We call this as gigantism. So these pituitary dwarfism and gigantism, the low level of GH or high level of GH can, if they happen before the closure of the epiphyseal plate, our growth plate can lead to the dwarfism or gigantism. If the high level of GH happens after the closure of the epiphyseal plate because we don't have the lengthening of our long bones anymore. So we can get like widening of our long bone. So it leads to the acromegaly in adults. The thyroid stimulating hormone is, or thyrotroph is another hormone going to be produced by the adrenal hypophysis. It's very easy because it says thyroid stimulating hormone. It means its target gland is thyroid. It's going to stimulate the thyroid gland to release thyroid hormones. The adrenal corticotropin hormone. The adrenal corticotropin hormone is also easy. Adrenal, it means the adrenal gland. Cortico, because the adrenal gland has two parts, the cortex and medulla. ACTH is gonna stimulate the cortex of adrenal gland to produce its own hormones like glucocorticoids like aldosterone and also the cortisol hormones. The other hormones produced by anterior lobe of hormones. Let me see, do I have any question here? Just going to watch this lecture again. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormones, they are gonadotropin hormones, means their target gland would be the gonads, ovaries, and testes. So the follicle stimulating hormone is going to stimulate the ovary to produce the oocyte. It's going to stimulate the oogenesis in ovaries. And the FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone in male, is going to stimulate the sperm production or spermatogenesis. LH, or luteinizing hormone, is it's going to stimulate the ovaries to produce the hormone, estrogen and progesterone hormone. And LH is going to stimulate the testes to produce testosterone hormones. Prolactin. Prolactin is a hormone which its target gland is breast tissue, which is gonna promote lactation. It's gonna increase the production of milk. Okay, that was about the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. But the posterior lobe of pituitary gland is a structurally part of the brain, because if you look at it under microscope, it seems it has a nervous tissue structure like neurons, axons, dendrites. The posterior lobe of pituitary gland does not produce any hormones. It's a storage for hormone. But which hormone? The hormones can be produced by hypothalamus. That's another story between the hypothalamus and posterior lobe of the hypophysis. Or this is about the neural connection between the hypothalamus and hypophysis. But this neural connection is between the hypothalamus and the neurohypophysis, or the posterior lobe. It means that here, the hypothalamus is going to produce the hormone, and then through the axons, it's going to send those hormones to the posterior lobe of the hypophysis. Then the posterior lobe of hypophysis is going to store it and then release it. So the posterior lobe is not going to produce any hormone, but it's going to release two hormones. So if I'm going to make question, of course, I'm going to make question from this part. For sure, I'm going to ask you that which of these hormones going to be released from the neurohypophysis. I'm not going to ask him which one of those hormones going to be produced by neurohypophysis, because neurohypophysis, it does not have any secretory cells. those cells are not able to produce hormones. Those hormones come from the hypothalamus, but they're going to release them. What are those hormones? There are two hormones, just two hormones. Please make sure you know these two hormones. ADH, antidiuretic hormone, or vasopressin, and oxytocin hormone. These two hormones are going to be produced by the hypothalamus and released by posterior lobe of hypophysis. The antidiuretic hormones target gland or target organs would be the kidneys, which the kidneys gonna actually be stimulated to reabsorb more water, and through reabsorbing more water is gonna like increase the fluid volume or blood volume, or it's gonna increase the blood pressure. So the antidiuretic hormone is gonna reabsorb more water through the kidney, then it's gonna increase the blood volume, it's going to increase the blood pressure. Oxytocin hormone. The oxytocin hormone's target organ would be uterus and ovary. Sorry, I'm so sorry. They're not ovary. Uterus and the mammary gland, breast. For uterus, it's going to stimulate the uterine contraction during the childbirth. And for breast, it's going to increase the milk secretion or ejection. So please make sure you know the oxytocin and prolactin hormone. The oxytocin and prolactin, both their target organs would be breast, but prolactin is going to increase the milk production, and oxytocin is going to increase the milk ejection or secretion, which they are different. So here you can see the relationship between the posterior pituitary gland and hypothalamus. So these nuclei in hypothalamus, they're going to produce the hormones ADH and oxytocin. And then through these axons, these hormones are going to be carried to the posterior lobe of pituitary gland, and then they're going to release their hormone into the blood. Okay, and here you can see that their target organs, uterus, stimulate the uterine contraction during the childbirth, and then for breast, it's going to initiate the milk ejection. And then antidiuretic hormone, its target organs would be the kidney, which they're going to stimulate the kidney to be able to reabsorb water, and they're going to increase the blood volume and increase the blood pressure. Thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is a gland which we have in our neck region. It's going to be like inferior to the larynx, and it's actually the largest pure endocrine gland. And in thyroid gland structure, you can find two different types of cells, follicular cell and parafollicular cells, which they can make different type of hormones. The follicular cells gonna produce the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. The parafollicular hormones gonna produce the calcitonin hormones. The thyroid hormone, their target gland would be all the cells in our body gonna be the thyroid hormones target cells, yes. Because the thyroid hormone gonna control the metabolic rate. It's gonna increase the metabolism in cells. And calcitonin hormone, it's gonna regulate the blood calcium level. The calcitonin hormone is a hormone gonna be produced by thyroid gland through the parafollicular cells. They're gonna decrease the blood calcium level. They're gonna decrease the blood calcium level. And their target cells or the target organ would be the osteoclast and kidney, because they're going to stimulate the osteoclast to destroy more bone. When we are going to destroy the bone, so their calcium going to be released into the blood. Or they're going to stimulate the kidney to reabsorb more calcium from their urine or filtrate from their urine formation actually. And then they're going to increase the blood calcium level. Oops, sorry. They're gonna they're gonna secrete more calcium, not reabsorb. They're gonna secrete more calcium. Then here you can see the thyroid gland. It has two lobes which are going to be connected in the middle through the isthmus. And then that's the histology picture of the thyroid gland, which you can see two different type of cells, the follicle cells, which going to be the majority of the cells in the thyroid gland, going to be the follicle cells, which they're going to produce T3 and T4 thyroid hormones, and parafollicular cells going to produce the calcitonin hormones, which they have completely different functions. Okay, we talked about the hormonal stimulus, the way that hypothalamus can, by releasing some hormones, can stimulate the other gland or inhibit the other gland, and also the hypophysis also can stimulate the other gland as well. For example, the pituitary gland, through the releasing TSH, is going to stimulate the thyroid gland, and thyroid gland going to produce its own hormone. Or the pituitary gland can, through the ACTH, can stimulate the adrenal gland to produce its own hormone. And also the pituitary gland, through the releasing gonadotropin hormone, it can stimulate the gonads, the testes and ovary, to produce their own hormone. Parathyroid gland, it's going to be four very tiny glands and posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. So they are very close to each other, but they have two different functions. In the parathyroid gland, we have a cell, we call them as cheap cells, which they're going to produce the parathyroid hormones. The parathyroid hormones is antagonist to calcitonin, because parathyroid hormone is going to increase the blood calcium level. But calcitonin is going to decrease the blood calcium level. So these two glands, they have different functions. Pancreas. Pancreas is an organ which actually it belongs to our digestive system. As an exocrine gland, it can produce too many important enzymes to digest the fat, to digest the protein, to digest the carbohydrates. But as an endocrine gland, it can produce some important hormone. So our pancreas, it has two portions, exocrine, which can secrete the digestive enzymes into the small intestine, and endocrine cells, which we call this as pancreatic islets or islet of Langerhans, is the name of the endocrine portion of the pancreas, which they can produce the hormones. In the pancreatic islets, we have different type of cells. So so you have only two of them here. So the alpha cell and beta cell, the alpha cell is going to produce the glucagon hormone, which the glucagon hormone, it can increase the blood sugar level, the blood glucose level. And its target organ would be liver. So it's gonna stimulate the liver to release the glucose from the glycogen. And then beta cells, they're going to produce the insulin hormone, which I can say that all the cells in our body, they have receptors for the insulin. And then when there is insulin, they're going to be stimulated to take up glucose from the blood. And that's the reason the insulin can decrease the blood sugar level. Diabetes mellitus, we have two types of diabetes mellitus, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is more like based on genetic. It can manifest during the childhood before the age of 15. It's kind of autoimmune disease. It's not because of the lack of the insulin, but the type 2 diabetes, which can occur after 40, age of 40, and it's more based on the diet and lifestyle, and they actually because of not have the sufficient insulin, the blood sugar level gonna increase. Adrenal glands are the glands situated on top of the kidneys. The adrenal glands have two portions, the cortex and medulla. So if this is adrenal gland, I can divide them to two parts. These two portions are completely different. If you look at them under microscope, their structures are different. The cortex is more glandular, and then medulla is more neural. They look like the nervous tissue. From the embryology origin, they are different. And from the action are actually different. The hormones they're gonna produce are different. So in medulla, we have like a very close relation between the sympathetic fibers and the medulla part, which they're gonna produce and release norepinephrine, epinephrine and norepinephrine. And then in the cortex, we can find three layers. From outside to the inside, we have zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. Based on the shape of the cells which we have in those three layers, we can name them as zona glomerulosa, because the cell's gonna make some like a collection, like the more like a granules, the glomerulus shape. And then the fasciculata is kind of like a cord shape. We call this as zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis is going to be like mix, like a network. So they have different type of function as well. So the adrenal medulla, the cells here, we call this as chromaffin cells. They're very similar to the postganglionic sympathetic neurons, which they're gonna produce the norepinephrine and epinephrine hormones. So in the sympathetic system is the fight and flight system. So in response to fight and flight, the adrenal medulla can produce the norepinephrine and norepinephrine. The adrenal cortex, it can secrete different type of hormones. It can produce the mineralocorticoids by the zona glomerulosa, which is the outermost layer in the cortex. The example of this group of hormones is aldosterone hormone, which it can regulate the sodium level. It can increase the sodium in our blood. The glucocorticoids are the hormones going to be produced by zona fasciculata, the middle layer of the cortex, and the zona reticularis, the inner layer of the cortex. The example of glucocorticoids is cortisol hormone, which it helps the body deal with the stressful situation. And also our adrenal cortex is going to produce the androgenic hormone like testosterone and estrogen. That's the reason. Because I'm sure you know the testosterone is a hormone which can be produced and released by testes in male. And estrogen is the hormone can be produced and released by ovary in female. But in female blood, we have a little amount of testosterone. And in male blood, we have a little amount of estrogen. Do we have testes in our body? Of course not. But they come from where? The testosterone in our blood comes from adrenal cortex, and the estrogen in the male blood, it comes from the adrenal cortex. Okay, so if I ask you that, why do we have testosterone in the female blood? It's because the adrenal cortex. It comes from the adrenal cortex. Okay, so that's a picture which you can see those 3 different layers. So look at the zona glomerulosa and the shape of the cells here, and the zona fasciculata, which the cells are kind of make a cord-shaped structure, and the zona reticularis. So at zona glomerulosa, they're gonna produce the aldosterone, which gonna increase the sodium level in our blood. The zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, they're gonna produce the cortisol and androgens, and then adrenal medulla, like the sympathetic fibers, they're going to produce the epinephrine and norepinephrine in fight and flight. I'm going to skip this one. The gonads, the main sources of sex hormones are testes and ovaries. So in male, in testes, there are some cells, we call them as Leydig cells or interstitial cells. Which they are responsible to produce testosterone. What is the role of testosterone? They're gonna promote the formation of sperm. Without testosterone, spermatogenesis cannot happen. So it's a very important hormone for spermatogenesis. And also during the puberty, it's gonna maintain the secondary sex characteristics for boys. And in female, we have ovaries. So as I mentioned before, the ovaries, the testes, they are the primary sex organs of reproductive system, but they have some cells which they are endocrine cells and they can produce hormones. So there are some cells in our gonads, which we call them as like the Theca cells. Those can produce the estrogen and progesterone hormones. Okay, so mostly the Theca cells going to produce the estrogen hormones, which the estrogen hormone, again, during the puberty for female, it's going to maintain the secondary sex features, and also it's going to signals the uterine mucosa, the inner layer of the uterus, to repair itself, to rebuild itself after the menstrual period. And also in female, there are some other cells or the structure which we call this as corpus luteum, and also the granulosa cells, which they're gonna produce the progesterone hormone. What is the action of progesterone hormone? The progesterone hormone is going to prepare the uterus for pregnancy. The corpus luteum also can produce, we talked about this actually. So now you know the ovaries can produce these 2 hormones, the estrogen and progesterone, by 2 different types of cells, the estrogen by Theca cells and the progesterone by corpus luteum and granulosa cells, and you know their action in our body as well. So that shows the hormonal stimulus, how the hypothalamus can control the hypophysis, the anterior lobe of hypophysis, and how anterior lobe of hypophysis can regulate and control the secretion of the gonads. Okay. There are some other structures, maybe cells or tissues, which they can act like an endocrine organs or glands. So we have endocrine cells in some other like organs as well, like in GI tract, in the at the wall of the stomach, at the wall of the small intestine, there are some endocrine cells, which we call them as enteroendocrine cells. We have these cells at the inner layer of our alimentary canal, especially the stomach and the small intestine, which those cells can produce hormones. One of the hormones is like gastrin hormone. Gastrin hormone is a hormone going to be produced by stomach. And then stomach, and those cells going to release it into the blood. And then they can help with the digestion. Or there are some hormones like the cholecystokinin hormone, which is going to be produced by small intestine, and then it's going to release them into the blood. As long as we have the cholecystokinin hormone, it's going to stimulate the liver to produce the bile. So you can see that they're going to help with the digestion or digestive function. The placenta. What is the placenta? Placenta is a very, very important structure between the baby and mother. It's everything for baby. The baby gonna actually breathe through the placenta. The baby gonna be supply and get nutrition through the placenta. The baby gonna remove its waste products through the placenta. So it's everything for the baby. And it's going to be between the mom and baby. But the placenta, besides those all jobs, it can act like an endocrine tissue. It's going to produce the human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, the HCG, which through the pregnancy test, they're gonna actually test this hormone. So the human chorionic gonadotropin, the HCG, is a hormone going to be produced by placenta. Can you believe that kidney, it has some cells, the endocrine cells, or kidney has an endocrine job? In kidney, we have some cells which they're going to produce the renin hormone, which the renin hormone can regulate the blood pressure. And also, I'm shocked that why they did not add this hormone for kidney as well. The kidney can produce the erythropoietin hormone. The erythropoietin hormone is a hormone can increase the red blood cell formation. Erythro means red. The erythropoietin is a hormone which it can stimulate the red blood cell formation. That's the reason if somebody has like a kidney issue, they might have problem with producing the erythropoietin, and they can get anemia because they cannot produce enough red blood cell. So the kidney also can produce the erythropoietin. Please add this into your slide.